Tamil civilization is one of the oldest continuing living civilizations in the world, and today the topic is Tamil landscape and culture. We, the Tamil people, carry the unique legacy of our ancestors in many perceivable and subtle ways in our daily life. தமிழன் என்றோர் இனமுண்டு தனியே அவர்க்கோர் குணமுண்டு sang the Tamil poet Namakal V. Ramalingam Pillai, and we shall take a brief journey in the next 30 minutes through the landscape of the Tamil country to understand how this deeply rooted culture came to be. Anthropology is the study of people, both past and present, and anthropogeography is a subdiscipline which deals with the geographical distribution of humankind and the relationship between human beings and their environment. Our ancestors came out of Africa about 65,000 years ago and settled in peninsular India. We came, we saw, and we never left. And this is evidenced by the genetic markers that we carry that can be traced back right to the first out of Africa migrants. Now, if you want to understand this in depth, I suggest that you catch on with my YouTube series, which is known as Know Your Roots. And from here, over tens of thousands of years, our ancestors have stayed in these regions, and living in this environment, the early man developed a symbiotic relationship with his environment. In behavioral sciences, we talk of social intelligence, emotional intelligence, spiritual intelligence. The environment shaped his thinking and imbibed him with what we might call environmental intelligence. Nature, with its multi-hued, magnificent canvas, the landscape, became the laboratory in which he did his experiments with life. The equable climate of this region, that is peninsular India, that never had to undergo any glacial epoch in the last 65,000 years. Remember, around 29,000 years, the rest of the world went into the last ice age. But here he was, our ancestor, happily continuing with his experiments in life, and nature was his teacher. The land taught him patience. The sweetest fruit came to those who waited. It taught him humility. Nature overpowered him at every turn, so much so that he ended venerating the 5 elements of nature: earth, water, air, fire, and ether. It taught him generosity. Nature shared her fruits with him without expecting anything in return. It taught him love, nurturing and nourishing him, and endurance. It helped him develop a stoic attitude towards life. So nature to him was an extension of himself, and he seemed to have understood instinctively what quantum physics is trying to establish in a lab today: how all life forms are made of subatomic particles that are constantly interchanging, dancing in a quantum soup, so to speak. At a very fundamental level, the tree outside my window and myself are one and the same. Organic unity. The realization of this made him virtuous and wise. Now, how do we know that our Tamil ancestor had such a thought process? Through the 26,350 lines of exquisite poetry that we call Sangam literature, carried forward memories from millennia ago, carried down by bards through oral tradition, and put down in writing somewhere between the 3rd century BCE and 3rd century AD, Sangam corpus promoted Mother Tamil to the rank of one of the greatest classical languages of the world. Here, I would like to quote Tamizh Venerable, the noted Czechoslovakian scholar. He writes, Sangam literature reveals a culture centered in humanism, pervaded by a concept of universal humanism, a unity of mankind drawn from the very nature of man, fundamental identity of all men that rests on a rational unity found between nature and cosmos, and above all, a stoic-like, unimpassioned acceptance of the facts of life. Now, capturing the essence of this in his immortal words, the humble poet who was born in Pungundram, which is today Mahibalanpatti in Sivagangai district, very close to where I live. Kaniyan, probably he was a man of numbers. We don't know his real name. Kaniyan Pungundranar, whose words today are enshrined in the United Nations, attesting to the fact that A thought that he gave 2000 years ago is still relevant for the 21st century. A poem that all of you must know, Yadum Ure Yavarum Kelir, Tidum Nandrum Pirartara Vara. For the benefit of those who cannot understand Sangam literature, I will straight away go into the English version of the song. All towns are own, everyone are kin. Evil and good are not brought by others. Pain and pain's relief come from within. Death is nothing new. We do not rejoice that living is sweet, nor resent it for not being so. Life's way is like that of a fragile raft, caught in the restless descending waters that lash on the rocks as lightning skies pour down the rains. We know this well from the vision of the wise. We marvel not at the greatness of the great, still less we despise men of low estate. Well, if life were a raft on a river, then one would probably try to swim against the current. But here, Tamil man realized that life was like a raft on a mountain river, a wild river, a kataru that is beyond our control, much like our river Vaihe, born in the Varsanadu Andipatti hills in the Western Ghats. Here in these mountainous regions, Tamil civilization was born. So as opposed to an Egyptian civilization on the Nile or a Sumerian civilization on the Euphrates and Tigris, Tamil civilization was born in these mountainous regions. Why? Before ancient man first learned how to build his own shelter or how to make a pot to store water, he lived in caves. And these caves protected him from the vagaries of weather, especially the torrential rains, which was part of the pluvial epoch that this land went through. And it had plenty of water resources at his disposal. These caves protected him from jungle animals and insects, so he naturally venerated the cave. Cave, Guhai, Guhan, Kundirukkum Idamellam, Kumaranirukkum Idam, literally the antiquity of the worship of the Muruga deity who presides over mountainous regions, lovingly named by our Tamil ancestor after the delicate flower Kurinji. As he progressed from a hunter-gatherer to a pastoral herder and seafarer, guided by the landscape around him, he devised the fivefold classification of the landscape, what is known as the Aindinai. This is the fulcrum of the Sangam literary convention. So how did he do this? The entire Tamil universe of this man was divided into Agam and Puram. Agam is inner world, representing matters of private life that gave birth to poetry of tender love. Puram, the external world, matters concerning war and greatness, fame and duty, public and political life, hence poetry about heroes. And this, the setting in which all this drama unfolded, was codified and systematically recorded by him in a work of grammar. Poruladhiharam, the chapter on matter in Tolgapiyam, which is the earliest extant Tamil literary work preceding the Sangam literary corpus and dated to somewhere before 500 BCE, nowhere in the world can one come across such a codification of the life of a people outlined in a work of grammar. The chapter on matter begins, Mudal karu uriporul endra moondre nuvalum kalai murai sirandanave. You must bear with me for this bit of a classroom format because this is something that we as the Tamil people who are celebrating our cultural space should know as a basic minimum. So this Tamil universe is divided into Mudal, Karu and Uriporul. So what is Mudal? முதல் எனப்படுவது நிலம் பொழுது இரண்டின் இயல்பென மொழிப இயல்புணர்ந்தோரே. As you can see in the first part, முதல் refers to time as in kalam and space as in nilam, the space-time continuum. Now how cool is that? And the author Tolhapiyar makes it clear, இயல்பென மொழிப இயல்புணர்ந்தோரே. Now he is recording for posterity something that was handed down to him. It was not his own thought. In over 343 places in the Tolgapiyam, Tolhapiyanar, the author, again we don't know his real name, this goes by the name of his work, he acknowledges his predecessors, so much so for humility and honesty in these days of cut and copy plagiarism. Then comes the Karuporul, which is the subject matter. And this subject matter is represented in God, in nature, human, non-human, names of peoples, occupations, flowers and trees. And all this he classified according to the landscape in which he lived, which are Kurinji, the mountainous regions, Mullai, the forest regions, Marudam, the agricultural field, Neithal, coastal lands or littoral region, and Palai, the desert region. Now, if I were to give just one example, taking into account Kurinji, the mountainous region, each and every one of these regions had 14 Karupuruls, that is subject matters, starting with the overall landscape, Kurinji, the mountainous region, named after the Kurinji flower, and the people, the Kuram and Kurati, their occupation being hunting, their work, Tenarital, collecting honey, the animals of the landscape, the elephant, tiger, bear, and wild boar, the birds of the landscape, the peacock and parrot, food being tinei and bedirnel, that is wild nell, and the trees being vengai and kongu, the flowers, again the vengai and kurinji flower, and the water body typical of this region being the mountain streams and mountain falls. Then comes the deity, in this case the presiding deity, the Murugu Devam. They had their own musical percussion instrument, the parai, in this case the Tondaha parai, and their own pan, musical system, which was again named after the flower, the Kurunji pan. They even had their own lute as in flute. So all these things together captured the inner world of man. And here comes the most interesting part, the Uriporul or behavior of people defined by landscape. Thus, Kurinji stood for Punardal, which in English means union, union of lovers. Mullai for Irithal, that is endurance and waiting. Marudam for Woodal, which is sulking. Neithal for longing, that is Irangal. And Palai for Piridal, that is separation. Now, how did he end up assigning these behavior patterns to these landscapes? One cannot go in detail, but just to give an example, look at Kurinji, the hill regions, lovers' union. Why is it that, generally in our case, we select hill stations like Kodaikanal or Ooty for our honeymoon? This is a connection that is ingrained in our psyche. That's how much I can go here. We don't have time to cover all the landscapes. But what this proves is that his matters of life were determined by the biosphere, the Uir Koram in which he lived, an organic unity that is unique to the Tamil civilization. Now, just as in Aham, when it came to the outer world, again, here I'm just noting only the trees that belong to the different regions. Every region has all the 14 Karupuruls. But if we take just the tree, for Kurinji, it is Vengai and Kongu. For Mullai, it is Kondrai and Kurundamaram. For Neithal, it is the Punnai Maram. For Marudam, the Marudam tree. And for Palai, the Palai Maram. So look at how ingrained are these trees in his psyche for him to name all his, the inner and outer world after trees. So here comes the Purattine. I'm just going to quickly give the names and not go into it in detail. And the 7 major divisions of Purattine are Vetchi, symbolifying cattle raid, Vanji, symbolifying invasion or preparation for war, Ulingai, siege, surrounding and blocking, Tumbai, that is battle. The plants that you see there are the plants described in the name. Tumbai is Tumbaipo and so on. And you have Vahe, the Vahe tree symbolifying victory, Padantine in praise, and Kanji for tragedy. Now, this Purattine has a lot of subdivisions known as Turai, which we will not go into here. So, living in sync with nature, imbibing its positive energy, endowed the Tamil people with a sense of virtuosity and righteousness that is captured in a whole gamut of literary work, starting from the Sangam literature to the Padanenkil Kanakku to the Tirukkural. There is an endless list. And the thought process that we still believe in but do not necessarily adhere to, when the 19th century philosopher poet Ramalinga Vallalar sang, Vaadiya Paire Kandapodellam Vaadinen, my heart sank whenever I sighted a withered plant. He was actually reflecting a very deep-rooted ideology. an ideology that the ancients entertained at an altogether different level. I will quote a very popular song from Natrinai 172, again the author unknown. விளையாடு ஆயமொடு வெண்மணல் அழுத்தி மருந்தனம் துறந்த கால் முளை அகைய நெய் பெய் தீம்பால் பெய்தினது வளர்ப்ப நும்மினும் சிறந்தது நுவ்வை ஆகுமென்று அன்னை கூறினள் புன்னையது சிறப்பே அம்ம நானுதும் நும்மொடு நகையே. A very beautiful setting where a little girl is playing in the front yard of her home, a very popular game. I've just shown a picture of the game being played at Kadambavanam. The kichi kichi tambalam nammala vandu chinna vayasla, at least naangala vandu idella vandu vilayanda da naanga valandom, where you put seeds inside the sand and play, right? So this little girl is playing, and at the end of the game, a punnai seed, what you see on the screen is a punnai flower, is left embedded in the sand. Second or third day, she sees a small sprout and understands that it's a punnai seed that she left while she played. She develops a bond with it and starts growing it. You know how? Not by pouring water, but by pouring honey and milk. She sort of nurtures it and adopts it like it were her child. Now this girl grows up, gets married and has a daughter. And while bringing up her daughter, she keeps showing the punnai tree that is also growing along and says, you see, this punnai is your elder sister because I nourished her and took care of her first. Now this daughter grows up, falls in love, and she whispers many nothings to her elder sister, the punnai tree. And once while sitting under the tree, the lover comes from behind and tries to embrace her. The girl runs away with the lover in pursuit. After going a little distance, she turns around and explains to her lover, you see, my dear, that punnai tree is my elder sister. How can you embrace me beneath her? I feel very shy. So what is the kind of symbiotic connection that this girl had with the tree, her elder sister? Now, Sangam literature has many such poignant situations which also help us understand the way of living of the people. Now, we know for a fact that in ancient times, this was a matriarchal society, and this song proves that a girl child after marriage in those days lived with the mother and not with the in-laws as it is the case today. Now, beyond this, there is another situation in Ahananuru song 270, which is really mind-blowing. Kadavul maratta mulmidai kudumbai, sevalodu punara siriharum pedai. This Sangam man has observed nature and recorded it beautifully in very many songs. There is this male bird, maybe a quail, and it was his duty to build a nest and then woo a female bird for mating. So here is a male bird, the sable, that has built a nest on a tree and has successfully wooed a female bird, the pedai. The pedai comes and sees the nest, but then it understands that the nest has been built on a kadavul maram. So then it asks the sable, how come you have built the nest on a god tree? We can't mate here and sullyfy its sanctity. So saying, it flew away. So this is the kind of extreme sensitivity that is caught in these Sangam works. Trees were and are considered sacred and worshipped, not just by us, but in other ancient cultures across the world, mostly associated with healing and fertility. Reeds, ribbons, and rags are hung from trees to establish a relationship with it. And in South America, native Indians even offered cigars and sacrificed animals to worship the tree, just as in the case of South India, where in sacred groves, we see people offering liquor and meat and worship the tree spirits like Muni. The Wanika tribe of Eastern Africa worshipped the coconut tree, and the destruction of the tree was considered matricide, as the coconut tree nourished them as a mother would nourish her child. Vietnam even has a coconut religion. And what you see here is known as the Yggdrasil, a very unique concept in Old Norse mythology, where the world is depicted as a tree, its branches holding up the sky, its roots going down into the bowels of the earth depicting hell. The tree provides a link between the heaven, earth, and hell, acting as an axis mundi holding up the cosmos. So, back home in East India, the bamboo is worshipped as a sacred tree. Why? Because it provides livelihood for the people. And the Buddha, of course, attained nirvana under the Bodhi tree. In Tamil country, the banyan, the peepal, the neem, and fig tree are considered auspicious and their worship is steeped in antiquity. How do we know this? Seals excavated from the Indus Valley that are dated to between 3000 and 2500 BCE carry images of tree worship, and you can see even a seal in which there is a god residing on a tree. Today, it has been accepted that the Tamil civilization, by and large, that is a part of the Dravidian culture, is the best fit for Indus civilization, explained by many scholars like Asko Porpola, which I've covered in about 8 episodes in Know Your Roots. While the Indus script itself is yet to be deciphered, it is the cultural markers revealed by the seals continue to this day in Tamil country that has helped establish the connect. So while sacred groves are fast disappearing, what we should understand is that we are not just losing trees, we are losing a way of life. Why did these Tamil people worship the trees? The trees were a means of livelihood. The trees were healers and hence God. The entire system of Siddha medicine evolved from the trees and herbs of Tamil country, and probably ISOLA can have a separate session on trees and healing as well. Over the past 10 years, many of the sacred groves that we documented around our resort Kadambavanam have simply vanished. A sacred forest in Vallalapatti was cleared to put up a Paka concrete and brick temple, which to those villagers signaled development. Similarly, in a local panchayat, the sacred grove was chopped off and sold to raise money for its development. You know, a very popular saying, Mada Mummari, irrespective of the monsoon season, Tamil country used to get 3 rains a month. And this we have witnessed just around 30 years ago in the Parali region, where our resort is something that has disappeared today. Thousands of trees were chopped off to make way for the 4-way laning that is happening there. And Madurai is no exemption, where these wise old trees had to make way for a smart city. Ironic, isn't it? While we worship tree as a talamaram in a temple, we go around killing and cutting off its brethren. So next is the interesting thing. How did we come about with the concept of a talamaram? Now, this is my own thinking. Old place names in Tamil country are suggestive of whole areas that were covered by a single species of tree, like how Madurai was a Kadambavanam, Chidambaram was Thillai Vanam, Tirunelveli was Veivanam, a forest of the bamboo tree, Tiruvadane was Vilvavanam, Tirukarhavur Mullai Vanam, Tirunageshwaram Shanbhagavanam, and Tiruvalangadu, the banyan forest. There is a very impressive list. Now, it is hard to believe that nature could have selectively bred these trees in specific regions. Perhaps our ancestors did planned landscaping on a macro level, as you would see, Singapore or a Beijing, and a large area landscaped. The leftover remnants of the forests they once represented became the talamaram in the temples in the respective regions. From sacred trees, we next go to the Kaval Maram, the protective trees of the kings of the land. Like even chieftains, Nannan and Thidiyan had Vahe and Punnai as their royal tree, and the great tree, the Moovendargal. Pannai or palm was the royal tree of the Cheras, Atti, the royal tree of the Cholas, and Vembu or Neem, the royal tree of the Pandyas. So many references in Sangam literature to the royal trees and the importance that was accorded to them. They were protected round the clock by soldiers, and if in war the enemy king cut down a royal tree, the Kaval Maram, it was seen as shameful and affected the morale of the soldiers, leading to defeat. Tamil people respected the land, man, and hence prefixed the respectful prefix Thiru to many a place like Tirumangalam, Tiruchirappalli, Tirukarhavur. Very surprisingly, in Sangam literature, the same prefix Thiru is attached to the name of a tree. In Aham 36, sung by Madurai's Nakirar, Varupunal Vaiyai Var Manal Ahanturai Thiru Marudu Ongiya Virimalar Kavil Kana Kadu Forest Aledu Ongi Nikkudu Abina Mr. Marudu Thiru Marudu tree. There are innumerable references about native trees in all the Sangam literary works. Now, what these references help us understand is the way the landscape has changed over the years. For example, our ancestors knew the importance of mangrove forests in the estuary areas in checking land erosion. In Tamil, they were known as Alayati Kadu. Of course, 1 or 2 of the remnants are still left, like this one at Muthupete in Tiruvarur district. 120 square kilometers of marshy lands, the mangroves full of a majority of a particular tree known as Surapunnai, which could withstand salt water, And there are references to Surapponnai. This is one of the lagoons in the same region. And of course, mangroves are being protected. This is a picture of the Adayar Creek estuary. This is the Punnai tree itself, references of which are found in the Tevaram, in Upper Tevaram, Aindam Tirumurai, on Tirumaraikadu, again wrongfully Sanskritized as Vedaranyam. The Marai with a Periyara is like Vedam, where this is actually Tirumaraikadu, the Chinnara Marai meaning the deer. So Tirumaraikadu, a forest full of the Mankutan. And the song goes, Panni Ner Modi Yalumai Pangaro. The final lines, Surakkum Punnaigal, Sul Maraikadaro, Sarakai Kadavam Therapy Minne. So showing that the naval coastal shoreline of Tirumaraikadu was full of mangrove forests of the Punnai tree. Now here comes the next reference sung by Tiruyana Sambandar on our Mailapur, Mattitta Punnayankana in Madamaile, Kattittam Kondan Kabali Charamamardan. The Kabali temple was a seashore temple right on the ocean coastline with its own coverage of Punnai forests about 1300 years ago. The Tevara hymnists lived in the 6th and 7th century AD, and the Periya Puranam that was composed in the 12th century AD that captures the lives of these hymnists has many references to show that the entire coastline in Chennai from the Marina Beach up to Mahabalipuram was full of mangrove forests, home to the Punnai tree, which is the tree of the naval landscape. Many such interesting references in literature. One more related to Madurai in Aham 59, sung by Madurai Marudan Ilanaganar. Soor Marungarutta Sudarilai Neduvel, Sinam Mihu Murugan Tanparangundratu, Anduvan Padiya Sandikede Neduvarai. Now, this is sung on our own Tirupurangundram here in Madurai, which is described as Sandikede Neduvarai, the mountain of dense sandalwood forests. Very hard to imagine, isn't it? Native trees of the Tamil country, like the hardwood teak or the aromatic ahil, also have helped us discover our antiquity in terms of archaeology and linguistics. How? You know, the archaeological excavations in Tamil country, right from Adichanallur to the latest Keeladi, none of them have been able to take back the dating of our antiquity beyond around 1000 to 1500 BC at the most. While in the Ur temple of Mesopotamia in Sumeria, dated to 3000 BCE, the temple was made extensively using teak. And the teak is believed to have come from South India, where it is a native species. Similarly, in an inscription in Sumeria on a clay tablet dated to 2600 BCE, a reference is there to a Magidam boat. And the root word for this word Magidam has been described by Asko Parpola as coming from Manju, a Tamil word for a boat made of timber, a single-masted cargo ship. I shouldn't say boat, because it was capable of carrying up to 40 tons of cargo that should have sailed from the coast of South India all the way to Mesopotamia. Our seafaring ancestors, அந்த காலத்திலேயே திரைக்கடலோடி திரவியம் தேடினார்கள். And also, these regions which were rich with timber, people should have probably used wood for constructing their homes, their temples, for making their tools, their granaries, weapons, and toys. And because of this, all of which decayed and decomposed, leaving no traces. Again, the words ahim and tuhi, found in King Solomon's Old Testament in Hebrew, dated to around 950 BCE, these two words are directly from Tamil, where ahim refers to the agil tree, that aromatic tree that was exported there, and tuhi meaning the peacock. Of course, one can go on, and there are about these references. And what is really stunning is the innumerable mundane contexts in which the relationship of the people with their trees is captured time and again in our literary works. And I will conclude with a couple of examples. One is from Needi Venba, 100 songs on morality and ethics composed almost 1000 years ago. And here is by an unknown author. Uttamartham iyumidattu ongu panai polvare, Mattimartham tengutanai manuvare, Muttalarumam kamugu polvar adamaravarhale, ten kadaliyum polvar terdu, using the nature of a tree to classify people. Now the palm tree, the Panai, was a very favorite tree, of course, the royal tree of the Cheras, dotting the landscape of Tamil country, hardly needed any care or water, but it was of so much use to the people that it is compared here to a nobleman who doesn't expect anything in return but contributes maximum to a society. The palm in Tamil Sangam literature goes by many names: Pennai, Edaham, Talam, Tali, Putrali. When the concept of marriage and tali were introduced for the first time in Tamil country, when sometime around 2300, 500 years ago, when people started breaking rules, and this is recorded in the Tolhapiyam, பொய்யும் வழுவும் தோன்றிய பின்னர் ஐயர் யாத்தனர் karanam என்பர். After man started lying, then he had to be compelled by the elders, that is the ayar, to get into karanam, that is a wedlock, sanctified by what? Thalam, the pane vole, which was made into a tali and tied around both the man and the woman, binding him. And of course, the pane vole, the vole chuvadi, the palm leaf script that helped him write down all this history. And more interestingly, there is this concept of arasanikal that we follow till this day in Tamil weddings without not necessarily understanding why we even do it. You know, we bring a branch of a tree, mostly an arasamaram, put it in a pot, tie a kapu around it and perform all pujas. In those days, the king of the land, you know, he was the one who was witness to all the happenings of his subjects, including their weddings. Of course, he couldn't be present there physically. So what represented him? A branch of his tree. And this branch was given utmost importance and worshipped, and it authorized and was witness to the marriage. So here the palm is compared to this. Then comes the coconut tree. The coconut tree, the more water you pour, the more it will yield. So these are medium people. Prati Ubaharam. You scratch my back, I scratch yours. And then you come to the kamahu or the arakanat. A lot of water and tender care, it hardly gives you much benefit. So these are the lower persons, the greedy persons who always want things for themselves and not willing to part with much in return. And then comes the banana or the plantain, the most auspicious of trees. Why? It not only gives benefit from its fruit, from its bark, from its leaves, so many usages which I need not tell you, but most importantly, when it dies, it leaves back its legacy in the form of shoots that come from underground, from its rhizome. And this is how a man should be, leave back a legacy for his generations to be like our Tamil ancestor. Probably that is why the tree is involved in all auspicious ceremonies in the Tamil country. So finally, I come to Pale Kali in Kali Tohai. Pale is separation, where, you know, the context is such that there is a lover and he has to go away across the desert regions to make money, leaving behind the heroine. The heroine is distraught and her ever faithful friend, the Tori, is there trying to dissuade the hero from going. So this is the context. And I'm going to go right away into the English version. You are planning to leave soon, even though I plead with you, saying that she will be ruined, like the flowering vines that have lost their grip on the trees on which they grow. Throughout Sangam literature, the vines like Valli Kodi, you know, that are creeping around a strong tree like the Vengai, are used as a simile for the slender heroine embracing her hero. You do not listen to me when I tell you that she will languish like the withered pretty sprouts on the beautiful trees on the path that you plan to treat fearlessly. But மேல் நின்று மெய்கூறும் கேளீர் போல் உண்மை உரைத்து திருத்தவர் நீ செல்லும் காணம் தகைப்பச் செலவு. மேல் நின்று மெய்கூறும் கேளீர் போல் உண்மை உரைத்து திருத்தவல்ல உறவினர் போல். Like kith and kin who point to you the right path, the truth with authority, and prevent you from going the wrong way, நீ செல்லும் காணம் தகைப்பச் செலவு. The dense forest that you intend to cross over will reveal many gracious things that remind you of her and will prevent you from going. So the dense forest is compared to the hero's kith and kin. So this is the beauty of the English translation, for which I profoundly thank Vaidehi Herbert, a great scholar who has translated the entire corpus of Sangam literature and Padinan Kizhakkanakku works into English. Of course, to enjoy the poignant ethos in one's own mother tongue is a very special gift. And I will end with one more small quote from Sangam literature. விருப்பு ஒன்று பட்டவர் உளம் நிறை உடைத்தன வரைச்சிறை உடைத்த வையை. The Vayai river, the Poya Kulakodi, is in full spate, is in floods. Varaichirai, Varai is her embankment, and she's going to break out of the jail of that embankment. And do you know what this is compared to? Viruppu ஒன்று பட்டவர் உளம் நிறை உடைத்தன. The lovers at the time of union lose their modesty with gay abandon. So this is the kind of thought process, and the need of the hour is to sensitize ourselves and our children, again endow them with the emotional and environmental intelligence that our ancestors had, going back to our roots and capturing our ideology for future generations is the idea behind our project Kadambavanam, about which I'm just sharing. Vanakkam. Welcome to Kadambavanam Temple of Tamil Traditions. Set in the sea of green in the countryside of Madurai, Tamil Nadu, Kadambavanam offers visitors a glimpse into the oldest continuously living civilization in the world, showcasing Tamil tradition and culture, arts and crafts, music and dances, spiritual beliefs and culinary delights. Our ethnic resort provides a culturally immersive experience through storytelling, recreating traditional rituals with guests participating hands-on, in addition to offering yoga and meditation, nature walks, village visits, cookery classes, handicrafts workshops, and lecture demonstrations. The Kadambavanam Cultural Center offers a cultural evening where guests can learn about our spiritual beliefs, sample Tamil games, a bit of astrology, the highlight being a presentation of Bharatanatyam, the classical dance of Tamil Nadu, and folk dances and leather puppetry, followed by a sumptuous, typical Tamil ethnic banana leaf dinner. Come to Kadambavanam and experience Tamil Nadu. Thank you. So I will stop sharing my screen.